behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Go-to-Market podcast. Appreciate you hanging out with us every week. This is going to be a fun one. My next guest really needs no introduction at all. I am joined by the infamous Justin Welsh. Welcome, my friend. How's it going?
Scott, so good to be here with you, man. It's been a long time, so I'm looking forward to chatting, catching up.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I often say that one of the things I love about this podcast is I just get to chat with friends and do like a live catch up, and we just hit record, and hopefully some actionable tips and advice come from it. But how's your summer been going? Where's home for you right now?
It's good, man. Home for me is in Hudson Valley, New York. So as you may recall, I don't even know if you knew it. My wife and I moved to Nashville during the pandemic from LA. We spent 2 years there. It wasn't ultimately the right fit for us, and so we were looking for a place to get away and build a quality life. And we actually came up to visit a friend here upstate, about 2 hours north of the city, and fell in love with it and bought a place here about 9 months ago. So just getting into it.
I love it. And I know you and your wife are big foodies, so that's got to be an important part of the decision-making factor. Is it a good food scene over there?
It's awesome, man. It's like, it's the opposite of the city, right? We're in the Catskill Mountains. It's pretty sparse. There's only 550 people in my town, but there's like 3 or 4 restaurants. But then if you drive 20 to 30 minutes in any direction, you get 1,000 other small towns that have their own restaurants and great produce and community supported agriculture and things that we really enjoy. West Wind here in New York, or upstate's a great pizzeria and cidery. So there's a lot of great places up here. We absolutely love it.
I love it. So I remember having dinner with you back in LA, way back in the day, and I believe you were like just getting interested in LinkedIn, and it's obviously been amazing to watch your growth and your journey since then. I know I said that you need no introduction, but I'm going to do one anyway. Just a quick one for those listeners who maybe don't have a LinkedIn account. But Justin helped scale ZocDoc as the director of strategic sales, and then scaled Patient Pop as the SVP of sales before leaving his intense executive role to go out on his own. And now you have over 425,000 followers on LinkedIn. I think right around the same mark for Twitter. You've got a newsletter, the Saturday Solopreneur, that has 150K subscribers, and that is insane. And over the course of the last 4 years, over 500 million impressions on all the content that you're doing. Now, I couldn't even imagine what it would cost an individual or a company to drive 500 million impressions. Have you ever tried to walk into that math if you were to do it on ads or something?
I haven't. There's all these like little calculators, but I don't really know. I don't even know anymore what an impression is worth. For companies, I don't pay too much attention to it. I know that if I was starting from scratch and trying to generate 500 million impressions via ads, it would be extraordinary amount of money. And so I've been really thankful that I started when I did and got a little bit of a head start on platforms like LinkedIn, a little bit behind on Twitter, but was able to catch up. But that's really what drives my business, right? Like top of funnel is my business. Every dollar that I make comes from introducing myself to a new audience member. So it's been a wild ride and something that I just truly was not expecting, to be quite honest.
It's been crazy. It's obviously watching along just how quickly it all happened, and obviously that's kudos to a lot of hard work and thinking through the actual strategy involved. And yeah, so you're also an angel investor, an advisor, you're an early supporter. an LP at GTM Fund, so thank you. And you have bundled a lot of this knowledge now into two main courses, right? One is like the operating system digital course that's more heavily LinkedIn focused, I believe. And then you have more of a holistic, the content OS digital course that's going to teach you, how to create content at scale.
That's right. It used to be called the LinkedIn operating system until LinkedIn lawyers saw that and got my website shut down the very like 2 hours after I launched, which was really fun. That put a huge glitch into it. But yeah, the operating system's all just about how to use LinkedIn, and it's really instead of using LinkedIn as like thought leadership or gaining engagement or comments or impressions or things like that. There's tons of people who do that. It's really about like how do you actually build a viable, meaningful business by using the platform successfully. I've done that, and I've taught 21,000 other people how to do that through the course. And so that's that. And then the content course that I have called the Content OS is really more of a holistic strategy around content. So with so many platforms out there, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, now Threads, there are so many different things to be cognizant of when it comes to content. And if you wake up each morning and look at a blank screen and you have a bunch of different platforms to go on, it can be really, really overwhelming. And if you don't have sort of a strategy, a model, a system to do that, you kind of burn out, right? And you can't really produce much anymore. So I've been spending the last 4 years trying to figure out how to do it really successfully. And everything I know about that goes into that course.
Yeah. And I can genuinely say I know hundreds of people who have taken at least one of those courses, and they all have incredible things to say. So, any listener that is interested in checking them out, make sure that you do. And we'll try and give a bit of a teaser of some of the stuff that's in there as we go through. But you mentioned Twitter, and Twitter has been the bane of my existence. I can't figure it out. I can't crack the code. I think, I've done fairly well on LinkedIn, but Twitter is this whole new ball game. And, now in VC land, I can see the importance of Twitter. Um, what are some of your tips for building on Twitter and maybe outlining some of the differences from a platform like LinkedIn?
First of all, like LinkedIn is a lot simpler because I think even though it looks crowded, I do truly believe that there are significantly fewer creators creating on LinkedIn right now. So again, your feed might seem crowded, but the amount of creators and the length at which they've been creating is a little smaller, and I think a little more immature in terms of the experience of the creator. So standing out is not as hard, right? Especially because LinkedIn's a professional platform. So how to step by step, giving valuable professional advice, that stuff really resonates on LinkedIn. It doesn't really resonate on Twitter. Twitter is more of an emotional platform. It's more of a, for lack of a better description, like a hot take platform, right? So it's like the spicier the take, the quippier, the shorter, the better that content does. And what happens is a lot of folks come over from LinkedIn and they just replicate that content that they have on LinkedIn. So they end up with this long-winded paragraph style professional content that's meant to drive home some sort of engagement on Twitter, but people are flipping with their thumbs so quickly on the platform to find something spicy, something interesting, something unique that they generally bypass quite long content. Even threads, Twitter threads, right? Not to be confused with the new threads platform, but Twitter threads, are long, but the opening thread hook is short, right? It's generally like a 2 line, a 3 line. It's really about catching attention and stopping the scroll. So for me, when I sort of deplatform my LinkedIn content over to Twitter, what I try and do is make it shorter, spicier, quippier. Um, uh, I don't like to use the word polarizing because I don't try and intentionally be polarizing, but I do take strong opinions that I have and share them unashamedly, right? You can't be wishy-washy. You can't say often or most times or usually. It's just like a hard stake in the ground. You have to just like you have to really write with a strong opinion. You can't be wishy-washy. And I see a lot of folks on LinkedIn do that because LinkedIn's professional and you don't want to get in trouble. And so the platforms are so very different. Um, so the way that I've gone about doing that really well is the same way I went about doing LinkedIn well, which was I found all the best creators on Twitter. And instead of like looking at what they write today, I just reverse engineered the early part of their journey. So I went back, 4 or 5 years when people had 1,000 followers instead of 1 million followers, and said, what were the milestones and traction points that they have in their sort of writing career that made them effective at Twitter? Really just made a catalog of all those learnings and then executed on those. As I did, certain things worked for me that worked for them, and certain things that worked for them didn't work for me. But over time, I was able to gain good traction. And once you get some traction, the Twitter sort of mafia, right, for lack of a better description, of players with large followings start to reach out to you and interact with your content. And then you get that secondary boost. And as that happens, you can start to become more of yourself. So you throw away some of the things you learned, you lean into some of the things that you feel more natural to you. And you can do that because you're a little further along, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, makes complete sense. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I'm very often fall victim to the often, most times, usually. I think that's like a hangover from being usually tied to another large software company like Outreach. So you don't want to be too spicy. And so I think that's great.
Go for it, man. You can't cushion it. It's just like it is or isn't binary,
Yeah, totally. Totally. And so I can see Twitter, because you have this Twitter mafia as you described it. And it seems like if any of those people engage with your content, like it just goes bananas. Did you did that happen organically for you, or did you reach out to some people as well and say, "Hey, let's create some content together," or just love your stuff? Because I guess sometimes people do that, like with me, more on LinkedIn, and everyone's just so busy. Was it organic for you?
Super organic, which is very thankful for. As I remember, like, I started writing on Twitter on October 25th, 2021. I tweeted before that, but like infrequently with huge spaces in between tweets, and you can't get any traction. Twitter is also a consistency platform. So when you miss, you get like downgraded. So I haven't missed a day in 700 days, or 650 some days. And usually that's 2 to 3 times a day I'll post. Um, and what happened was I grew steadily from 4,000, and then I crossed 20, and eventually I got up to right around like 70 or 75,000. And it almost felt like when I got there was like a switch that flipped where I became known to other people in the Twitter verse, and they started reaching out to me. And I had sort of a trump card, right? Which is all of the guys and gals who have 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 million followers on Twitter all started to see the power of LinkedIn. And I was lucky because I kind of became that guy early on, where I was the top performer in terms. Of course, there's people with more followers than me, but like in this sort of creator realm. And so when they reached out to me, they always wanted to know, how do you grow on LinkedIn, right? And so I use that bartering to say, well, I'll teach you everything I know about the platform, but how do you grow on Twitter, right? I'm at 70K. How do I get to 700K? So I took advantage of what they wanted, right, and did a barter or a transactional sort of knowledge swap. Um, in doing so, I formed a lot of really strong friendships. It went from being transactional to being like, hey, let's text each other each day and share, like, what are we learning about the platform? What are some interesting people we should be paying attention to? What are some business opportunities? And so I've made like incredible friends: Sahil Bloom, Amanda Getz, Dan Go, just like, Ben Meir. I just went to New York and had dinner with Dan Go and Ben Meir, who are two guys with, 500,000, 400,000 followers. So it's a lot about turning those Twitter relationships into real life relationships. And that's when things just kind of get out of control, which is a lot of fun.
And I know your kind of tagline is diversified solopreneur. Are you still completely solo in this? Like not missing a day for 700 days? Like that's a lot. Do you have anyone that's like a virtual assistant that can do it when you're, away or you're on vacation or you're shutting down for a couple of days?
Oh, my virtual assistant does not touch any content. Nobody touches content. So like, I have a part-time virtual assistant named Elizabeth. She works about 20 hours a month, and she does only customer service and takes care of newsletter sponsorships. So like, I get a lot of people who are like, hey, I can't log into the course, or I lost an invoice or something like that. So Elizabeth will help out with that and scheduling some of the sponsorships. Nobody touches my content. Not They don't write it, they don't add images, they don't add videos, they don't schedule it, they don't reply to comments. That is me every morning from 8:15 to 9:15 Eastern on LinkedIn. I'm there about the same time on Twitter. I write all that own stuff. It's just I own that creative part. Um, because I think the moment you outsource creativity is when you get in a lot of trouble, I think. Even like AI stuff, right? Like a lot of folks are using AI and they went from being these really prolific, interesting, unique creators, and suddenly the creative part is lacking. So I own that in its entirety.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the impact of AI, once it really gets good, uh, and, you can now feed all of your content in, and it will spit things out. But you don't do any of that. And do you use a scheduler?
I've used the scheduler since the day I started.
And you don't, that doesn't affect performance in any way? I've been like kind of worried about using them.
People are like, "Oh, I've heard XYZ," but nobody can like I've been hearing it for 4 years, but no one can like actually say, "I used the scheduler 10 times and then I posted manually 10 times and here are the results." Like not a single time. And even if that was the case, like if there was a 20% drop, is it worth like being able to be well organized? And so to me, I always feel like good content gets found. Um, and so I try and, especially being a one man show, I have to be as efficient as possible. And so scheduling tools, I have one specific for Twitter and one specific for LinkedIn because I want these very platform specific tools since it is, my full time job.
Yeah. Can you share the names of the two schedulers that you use?
I use Hype Fury for Twitter, and I love Hype Fury because it has a lot of built-in growth tools. Sorry, my dogs are going nuts because it's about to thunderstorm here. But it's got a lot of built-in growth tools, so auto retweeting, auto unretweeting, auto newsletter plugging, all these different things. Hype Fury is really great. And then I use Taplio for LinkedIn, Taplio, built by my buddy Thibaut, who I'm going to meet here in Paris pretty soon. He's a cool dude, just building like really neat scheduling tools and other SaaS platforms. That is also super powerful on LinkedIn. It has its own AI component. I don't use AI to write. I only use AI to ideate. I think it's a terrible writer, but it's got all these built-in growth tools, just like Hype Fury does on the LinkedIn side. So that's my go-to platform for that.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. All right, we talked a little bit about threads, not Twitter threads, but the new hype that I had 70 million people signed up for in a day. What's your take? Are you exploring it? Do you plan on building there as well? Are you more of like, no, I've picked my platforms, I'm good? What's your take?
So Threads was really fun for the first few days. Everyone was looking for each other. That was cool. Uh, I think over the last week, like the amount of hype around it has died really drastically. Um, but I do see it as an opportunity to just be to widen my platform. And rather than have like a thread specific strategy right now, I'm not going to dedicate a ton of time to that until I know that it's going to be meaningful. So in the short term, I think of threads as a place where I can continue to share content that I'm already writing for LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. In long term, if it ends up being something that I grow on really well, I'll create a thread specific strategy, especially as I learn it and understand it.
And are you seeing that, at least in the early days, the Twitter strategy that you have, can you basically run the same motion, or do you think it's going to be a totally different game again?
Right now, I'm running the same motion. It's hard to tell if it's quote unquote working, um, because what does working look like on a new platform, right? Like, I only have 10,000 followers because I never built a huge Instagram following, and some people who did were able to port that following over very quickly. So I think when I see the engagement on my threads, given that I only have 10,000 followers there, it's pretty strong, 200, 300 engagements. So right now I'm just sort of repurposing Twitter content over there to see what's the upside, what's the downside, how does this platform work? And again, like I don't see myself investing a tremendous amount of time until the platform proves its worth and value to me. Uh, Maybe I'll fall behind because of that, but Twitter and LinkedIn served me very well.
Makes sense. Okay, so we talked a little bit about like Twitter strategy, the differences between LinkedIn. I want to fly you back to the time period where you were building and still at Patient Pops. You're at a SaaS company. You're spending more time creating your own content. What were some results you saw back in those days? Did it help you hire? Did it help you win business when you were more visible? I think that will be really interesting for a lot of our listeners who are likely, go to market leaders at SaaS companies right now.
Yeah, it didn't help us win more business because we had a physician client, right? And physicians are just notoriously not really on social media, especially LinkedIn. Like they're not going on and sharing stuff about healthcare. They're just not a huge traction there. So for us, it wasn't for business. For us, it was hiring. And if you think about it, like uh, I connected with Kevin Dorsey there in 2017. And when I connected with, it might have been 2018, I might get the dates wrong, but when I connected with Kevin, we started a relationship via LinkedIn, ended up getting coffee, and then Kevin came on to my team as the VP of Inside Sales. And when he did that, we had two sort of guys who had strong LinkedIn followings at that time, right? Uh, when Kevin and I went from, being I was the VP of sales, the SVP of sales, Kevin was VP of inside sales. We started creating on a regular basis, talking about sales development, outbound sales, inbound sales, SaaS sales, B2B, SMB stuff. Pretty soon, we just continued to grow really quickly. And then we got all this inbound traffic via LinkedIn, messages to me, messages to Kevin, things like, oh my gosh, I've been following both of you guys for a year or 2 years or whatever. And I just really want to work for you. Do you have any open positions? And so we would just funnel all of that inbound traffic over to our recruiting team. And that was the first way that it helped, was just like created a ton of inbound desire to come work for me and to come work for Kevin, especially when we were working together. I think we sort of had that 1-2 punch. The other thing that it did is it made it really easy to go outbound. So like after I had 80,000, 100,000 followers, I could build a list of reps that I wanted to hire from other companies, President's Club winners, award winners, and just go to them and say, hey, just wanted to connect with you. And generally, they knew who I was. They had seen my content, they had read it, they had engaged with it, and they were excited to get a message. And that's, not tooting my own horn by any means, but that was just the way that it was working, especially when the platform was less crowded. So it really drove inbound leads to our recruitment team. And then it made it really easy to kind of go out and really pinpoint those reps that I wanted to hire and make that engagement and that interaction with them significantly easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I imagine all the executives listening to this right now, if you could create a world where you could go out and hand select the top 1% reps and get them on your team, that is a worthwhile, investment for any leader. For those folks, what are your top 5 tips for executives or founders looking to build on LinkedIn and duplicate some of the stuff that you did?
Yeah. First of all, look the part, right? Like, there's so many profiles out there, like sloppy pictures, sloppy banner, sloppy about me. It's just like thrown together. That's the foundation of the house, right? So first of all, you got to look the part. Professional headshot, professional about me, company banner. Everything has to be really, really tight. That's sort of number one. Number two is you got to get your content pillars down. What are you going to talk about on a regular basis? You can't talk about enterprise sales one day and then SMB and then your favorite pizza restaurant and then the vacation that you and your wife or spouse are going on. You can do that as you build a larger following and people get more interested in knowing about who you are personally. But in sort of the early day, it's like, what are you going to talk about every day? I always say if somebody comes across your content, they should be able to take your name and your face off it and know that it's you. That's how that's kind of point three, which it's not just about topics, but it's also about style. So like, how do you write? How do you sound? What's your voice? If you can nail those first three things, you're in a really, really good spot. I would say that maybe 4 and 5 would be the last things I talked about with the recruiting team. Number 4, set up a process and system for when you get inbound leads. Because as a VP of sales or a chief revenue officer, you're busy, right? And if you get 30 inbound leads, like you're not going to go out and read through everyone's profile and respond to every message. Like, how are you going to systematize that work? You want to reap the rewards from your efforts. How do you systematize that? And then number 5 is like, okay, if you get some traction, how do you leverage that traction? And the easiest way to do that is to get really pinpointed, as I said earlier. So, what is your outbound strategy? What are your messages to top reps? Who builds that list of reps for you? You don't want to be scrolling LinkedIn all day. It's like you need to hire somebody for your team, give them exact characteristics of a top rep, and say, hey, here's 100 top reps. Here's the message that I want to bring out to them. And here's the outreach strategy. And I think if you nail that, like, number 1, great profile. Number 2, content pillars. Number 3, tone, style, and emotion. Number 4, inbound process. And number 5, strategic outbound process. If you do those things really well, you're going to be in good shape.
I love it. I love it. And any big mistakes you see that people should avoid at all costs?
Yeah, they don't talk to their boss and they don't talk to the people that work for them first, right? So, like, when I was getting really active on LinkedIn, the first thing that I did before doing it was go to my co-CEOs, Luke and Travis, and said, "This is what I'm going to be doing. This is why I'm going to be doing it. Here's my hypothesis for the outcome. Do you guys approve?" Basically, and they were like, "Yeah, that's great. We 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 need good salespeople, and if you think that you can create a brand that attracts those people, then yeah, prove it to us, right? Show us that it works, and then we'll back you 100%." I mistakenly did not do the same thing with the people who reported to me. So at the time, I had like a team of 50 or 60, maybe at that time, and suddenly they see their executive who runs their program on social media quite frequently. And when you don't set expectations and when the mind is left to wander or imagine, you know what happens, right? The minute something goes bad at the organization in your department, that's the reason. Oh, it went bad because Justin's on social media. It went bad because Katie's on social media, right? When everything good is happening, it doesn't it doesn't matter at all. But the moment a bad thing happens, like, that becomes the scapegoat. So I should have done a better job early in my career setting expectations and presenting the why behind what I was doing.
I think that is really, really helpful, and you see it all the time. And it sounds like you did a great job managing up, but yeah, managing down is just as important. Share that why, encourage them, even teach them, how to do it themselves if they want to. Um, I think that's fantastic advice. So I want to go back again to that time period, and I know you've been fairly open about experiencing burnout, as a lot of SaaS executives do. It's incredibly common. It is not often talked about, um, and I think it's awesome that you're open to discussing that. And I would love to just hear that story of how that all went down before you made this jump to really bet on yourself.
So I got hired in January of 2015 at Patient Pop. And prior to that, I was the director of strategic sales at a company called ZocDoc, which you mentioned. And my sort of hypothesis was that I was going to come into the company. I may have told you this at dinner back in the day, and get the business to 1 million in ARR, 3 million, 5 million. Then they'd hire some guy or gal who had done this for 20 years over me, and I would, take the role below. That was what I thought would happen. And Luke and Travis really backed me from the very beginning. Great CEOs, and gave me sort of the leeway to go out and build the team that I wanted to build. So I went and pulled a bunch of my friends from ZocDoc who were top performers, and pretty soon we did 3 million in my first year, I think 9 million in my second, and then 25 million in the third. Um, and I was like, oh, wow, this is way bigger than I had anticipated my career would go. And a lot of people go 0 to 1. A lot of folks go 1 to 5. Some people go 5 to 15. I went 0 to 51 when I left. And like, every new day was something I had never seen before. Every new hire was the biggest team I had ever had. Every new dollar was the biggest revenue number that we had ever hit. And burnout to me doesn't come from overwork. I can work really hard for long periods of time. To me, burnout comes from loss of control. And as these problems began to compound, whereas at 3 million and 5 million and 8 million, I had a solution, I found that I didn't necessarily have a solution at 45 million, at 51 million. And so things started stacking up. And as things started stacking up, uh, it began to get really overwhelming. And then compounded and compounded and compounded. And in December of 2018, uh, we had a Christmas party, and I went out to the Christmas party, and we stayed out pretty late. Like, we were out till probably midnight, which I go to bed at 9:30 every night. So that was like a late night for me, having fun with the team, having fun with the CEOs. The next morning I woke up and my wife asked me if I wanted to go get some lunch. So we did. And my fingers started tingling. And we had to turn around and go home because I was starting to have a lot of anxiety. And when I got home, what erupted was sort of this like 2.5 hour panic attack of just like hallucinations, screaming. Uh, Never thought I thought I was gonna die. I didn't know what was happening. It was really, really scary. It's happened to me again since, actually, about 3 months ago. So it turns out that this can happen even after you get yourself together, but that was a good sign that something needed to change. And what needed to change with me was how I was managing the overwhelm. The way that I was managing that overwhelm was classic ways that people do it: eating too much, drinking too much, sleeping too little, not exercising, not taking care of myself. I was 230 pounds. To give you context, I'm normally around 200 pounds. So I was 30 pounds overweight. Um, and that just all culminated in this really terrible thing. And so the next day, I decided to start walking. So my wife and I started walking between 6 and 10 miles a day. I cut alcohol for 90 straight days, started eating a whole, food diet. And I got down to like 175 pounds, no alcohol, exercising every day. And that helped me make the leap to my own business when I did that on August 1st of 2019.
Well, first off, thank you for sharing that story and being open and candid. I think it's really important we have these discussions because they usually only happen behind closed doors with folks, and I think it's important to share them. And so, looking back at that time period, what would your advice to Justin be before this severe anxiety attack? Do you think you could have got ahead of it?
Yeah, probably. I was younger then, so I was 37, I think. Yeah, and to give some context, I'm 42 now, so, like, I was a little less likely to ask for help. I was a little less likely to go to my CEOs and say, "Hey, there's, like, a lot of stuff compounding, and I don't actually know how to solve it." Because to me, like, being able to solve the problems was what made the CEOs have confidence in me, and I didn't wanna lose that confidence. So I think I would have been more open and transparent with the guys that I was reporting to, because as I look back on it now, 5 years later, I know that they would have supported me. I know that even if I had said, "Hey, I need to take a month off and get my stuff together," like, that would have been fine. There are no indicators in my relationship with those guys during that time and ever since that wouldn't have been the case.
The asking for help piece is super difficult, and I'm sure at that time though that would have just seemed insane to like pause for a month because you're just so focused on the next day and the number. But then once you do give yourself a little space, you're like, oh, like we are not saving lives. Like there is other people that can help and support. But unfortunately, it feels like we can only see that looking back sometimes. But that's awesome, man. So I wanted to quickly go shift gears a little bit and go to a listener question. And I thought this was a great question, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but maybe we can summarize. Um, and I think this is very, very common. And the question is, most of my exec team thinks that LinkedIn is a waste of time, but I've seen some good early results. How would you influence their thinking and get them on board? Should I build a formal business case? And I know that you did that at Patient Pop. What was in there? Was it all around this hiring use case? And did you give yourself a 6-month period and be like, hey, I'm going to share all the analytics and results? Walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, totally. So I had an idea that if I was active on LinkedIn, that I would increase the number of inbound direct messages I got from salespeople, and that if I were to make a list of 100 salespeople we wanted to hire at the company, that I could get through that list and have good conversion rates. That was like this sort of easy hypothesis. And so I didn't ask for 6 months. I asked for, I think, 12 months back in the day. I might be misremembering. but I knew I needed some time to get traction at the business. So for the listener question, the first thing I would do is I would translate some good early results to, like, what does that mean? Right? Like, what does some good early results mean? Like, you've gotten more inbound requests from your prospects or customers. Your DMs are getting opened and responded to with positive sentiment more often. The number of people who are anecdotally talking about they've seen you on LinkedIn when you send your outbound email sequences, is that improving? Like, what are the metrics that are improving? Is someone come to you direct from LinkedIn and you closed a deal? If like that happened, it's like, great. How big was the deal? How much time did it take to close that? Compare that against other activities that you're doing on a regular basis. So the first thing that I would do is just make a few simple hypotheses. Like, it doesn't have to be really, really deep and complex. It's just like, I think that by adding 10,000 followers to my LinkedIn account and being seen every day in front of my target audience, that I will improve the open rates of my emails. I'll improve the response rates of my emails. I will improve the number of DMs I get from prospective customers. Like, what are the things that you think will happen? Because I fear, because I've worked with salespeople for so long, that they'll go into the meeting with their boss and they'll say, I'm seeing some good early results. And the boss will say, what does that mean? Right? Like, feeling doesn't do anything. So, like, quantify those feelings. And then the second thing that I might do is just kind of go in and say, here's how I'm going to approach this, not as a substitute for the things that I'm already doing, but as something that's additive to what I'm already doing. So I'm not an advocate for working before and after hours. I think companies can really take advantage of people when you start doing that. But if you do want to prove that something works, it might be beneficial in the early stages to say, I'm going to be on LinkedIn 30 minutes in the morning before work starts, and I'm going to be on LinkedIn 30 minutes in the evening after work ends. And if you can spend an hour and say, for every hour that I spend on LinkedIn, here are five, very quantitative things that happen. Now compare that hour and those quantitative metrics to an hour on the phone, an hour sending email, an hour doing this, and like, lay them out. Here are four tasks I do that take an hour. Here are the responses from those four tasks. If you can show that LinkedIn is number one or maybe number two in that sort of task list, well, then you can remove the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after and say, all right, I've proven that this works. Let's install a process or system that allows me to do this during the workday. And then, oh, by the way, what happens if I get 2 times better at this? And, like, maybe you dedicate 2 hours, maybe you dedicate 3 hours. But it's not up to you to say how it feels or how you think it's working. That has to be documented and shared with your leadership team.
That's great. So come with some hypothesis, quantify your results, give yourself some like KPIs, stand by them. And then I really like that last piece. That's always how I ran experiments. I would do them outside of work. And then if they worked, double down, spend more time during actual work hours. Well, Justin, this has been awesome, man. I have two more questions for you. And I always keep these intentionally vague so you can take them anywhere you want. First question is, what's one tactic or strategy that founders or executives believe to be true that you think is bullshit or no longer serving us?
I don't know if executives and leadership believe it to be true, but I see it permeating SaaS culture, maybe even more from the ground up than from top down. But there's like, and I'm probably going to get skewered for this, but um, there's this whole new like leadership 2.0 model, which is really empathetic, which, by the way, I love empathy. I'm an empathetic person. I want people to do well. But it's like so overly empathetic and so like we have to make everybody feel good. And so, like, even though someone's not very good at this job that I hired for, you just got to keep working with them and give them time. That's why you hire people. And it's like, I come from a different era. And maybe this is why I don't do this anymore. Um, I come from an era where you hire slow and you fire fast. And especially in the SMB SaaS world, when 2 to 3 sales cycles is enough to show someone's competence and to show someone's ability and desire to be really good at your business. I am still a believer in some of these old school thoughts where it's like you get A players, right? C players drag your team down. B players often form the foundation of your team. but you should never be spending a majority of your time. Your directors and your managers should never be spending a majority of their time trying to coach up people who are obviously not a great fit. And I think the most empathetic thing that you can do in that situation is let people go and let them find a job that they're going to be really good at, that they truly enjoy, that they can make a lot of money at, and they can have a huge impact at. And so when I see a lot of this like LinkedIn content and thought leadership content all about how, managers aren't fair and they don't spend enough time with the poor performers, and it just like, it's a business, man. Like, the board isn't super excited about whether or not you got someone who was a C or D player and it took you 9 months to make them a B player. Like that doesn't bring smiles to the face in the boardroom. And so that's how you have to operate. I maybe I get skewered for that, but that's something I feel strongly about.
I like the take, and it does feel like the pendulum is swinging a little bit back into that camp as we kind of are in wartime in this like down market. I think some of those behaviors and ideas, they just doing hard things and scaling companies is really fucking hard. It requires an insane amount of skill, an insane amount of talent, and an insane amount of work ethic. Like the default is failing. So you have to do everything to push, a boulder up a mountain, and that's going to be hard.
And I'll tell you something that not like I don't really make public about my career, which is I was a multi-award winning salesperson at ZocDoc. I was a multi-award winning salesperson at Public Stuff. And then, I obviously built Patient Pop from its first dollar up to 50 million. But there's a 3-month window in there where I worked for Salesforce and I was a mid-market account executive. And you know what? I absolutely sucked at that job. And I fired myself before the boss could fire me. Like 90 days in, I was like, I hate this. I'm not good at it. My boss knows I'm not good at it. Why would I want to go to work and do that? Let's quit wasting everyone's time. I just quit. That was it. I wish more people would do that.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I think that's a great way to highlight of, you saying it can be the most empathetic thing for you to do is fire them. Because, this could be their Salesforce job, the one that just doesn't work. The motion's not a fit. The buyer's not the fit. So yeah, go release them into the wild to go find their position they can thrive in. All right. Final question, my friend, is what's one tactic or strategy that's been working for you lately? Whether it's like a growth hack or something that people listening can hopefully steal and try and implement themselves.
Yeah. Well, one just really simple, which is, my business is a volume business. So it's different than a SaaS company, but I think they can still effectively use this, especially if they get people on their team who have big personal brands on LinkedIn. So imagine that your CMO or your VP of marketing has a big brand like a Dave Gerhardt, right? 200,000, 300,000 followers. When you publish content, that content takes generally when you have that big of a following, it takes off pretty quickly, right? You get 1,000 comments and engagement in the first 60 minutes. What I've been doing is sharing ideas. And then about 10 to 15 minutes in, after these things are really entrenched on the platform and they're just growing really rapidly, is I already have pre-set up a piece of content on my website that has a call to action that is relevant to what I've written. So often I'll write like a LinkedIn post. I'll wait until it's get 200, 250, 300, 500 engagements. And then I know that thing is hot. And I'll go in and I'll edit it. And I'll say, if you want to learn more about this, I do a much deeper dive on this subject here on my website, at this blog, in this newsletter, on this video, whatever. I think SaaS teams can leverage that, especially if they have any position that has a huge following, to drive their prospect, their ideal prospect or customer, back to their website, where they can move them from problem aware of the problem they have, to solution aware, the fact that you have a solution, right? Or product aware, the fact that your product is the best product or solution for them. I don't see a lot of people doing that. They just post and walk away. Maybe they write some comments, but there's like, okay, I love this piece of content that you wrote. Now what should I do? Like, tell the audience what to do so that you can actually get meaningful results from that piece of content. If I had a huge following and I wanted people to go sign up for a lead magnet or join a webinar or whatever, I would be doing way more of that. And I see absolutely zero of it.
Yeah, that's super tactical. So you write your thought leadership, piece, you see it's doing well, you will then go in, edit it. Is there a time window that you should be wary of?
They say not for 10 minutes, but when I say they say, it's like you hear these things, right? Who knows how true they are? I just kind of take that and was like, okay, great. It'll be at minimum 10 minutes. Sometimes I'll wait until it gets a little more traction. But to be clear, like I drive about 90,000 monthly visits to my website from LinkedIn. How valuable would that be to a SaaS company?
Insanely valuable. Yeah. We actually just had Dave Gerhardt on the pod. Should be coming out soon. But man, this has been awesome. Thanks for being an open book, sharing all these strategies, and appreciate your personal story, and always rooting for your continued success, my friend. But thanks for hanging out with me.
Scott, great to talk to you, man. And hope you enjoy Vancouver, brother.
Thank you. And for all those listeners, appreciate you hanging out with us. As always, listening is one thing, executing is where it all happens. So take some of these strategies, test them out, help move the needle for your business, and we will see you all next week.